Tuning into our 6th episode of Brave TV. I'm Jennifer Marshall. I'm the executive director and co-founder of This Is My Brave, and we're so glad you're with us. Today is a very special episode of Brave TV where we're talking about student mental health during this time of COVID-19. So, just to give you a recap, the main concept of Brave TV is for us to bring stories of hope into the homes of our audience during this COVID pandemic. Each week, we're going to cover topics that our own Brave alumni can lend their expertise on. This gives our alumni an opportunity to share their stories on another platform, to talk about their journey with This Is My Brave, and to offer support and resources to viewers who may be having similar struggles, especially during such a high stress time. We're really happy to be able to bring these stories to you and these incredible individuals who are part of our Brave community. So again, this week's theme is student mental health, the impact of COVID-19. We know students of all ages across the world are grieving and struggling right now. Whether their sports season was cut short, their prom was canceled, or they're unable to walk across the stage for graduation, the effects of COVID-19, the effects that the pandemic is playing on student mental health is dramatic. This episode will open up a discussion about how things have changed and how students are coping, and also how parents can help. So, I am going to begin this week's episode with Joe Perry. And Joe is one of our high school participants in one of our shows, and he's also participating in a current project that This Is My Brave is a content partner on, which is our Teen Video Diaries project that is being brought to you by WETA and Principal Pictures. So you may have seen it on our social media. We're really proud of all the brave teenagers that are participating, and Joe is one of them. So before I bring Joe out to the main stage to talk, I want to show you guys a clip from his performance in our Columbus, Ohio show. So bear with me, I'm getting better at Brave TV each week, but let me bring in his video.
Who battled an eating disorder. And I say I would have done anything in the world to help her fight through it. But the truth is, I was useless. I had no clue this was going on. Beneath her smile, her illness, like mine, knew how to hide. I knew a guy with incredible love. He loved this one girl, and by that he was undone. She didn't love him, so mental illness told him to stop loving himself. So he put himself through hell. But he did so silently. And it was months before anyone found out, almost too late for him. You see, we all know a guy or a girl. Maybe they're close, maybe they're not, but that's not the point. We all know what it looks like. We just don't know that we know. And it's what we don't know that hurts us. So let's turn the page. Let's make a change. We all need to agree to wage a full-out assault on these diseases. Fight it while we're alive. Don't just mourn us while we're dead.
That was Joe, a piece of his performance. I encourage you to check out his full performance piece. He did 2 poems for us in the Columbus show, and I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Joe. I'm going to bring him in here. Just give me 1 second. Hi, Joe.
Hi, hello everyone.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right today. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm really good. So
Glad to hear it.
I see you have a special friend with you too. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, where you're zooming in from today, and who you brought with you.
Yeah, so um I am Joe Perry. I'm 17. I'm zooming in from Columbus, Ohio, or a suburb of Columbus today. And this is my little dude Pickles. He's a cockatiel, a gray cockatiel. And he's been my little buddy since my birthday last year, which was the day I got out of the hospital for the first time. So
Wow. Well, tell us, I didn't realize you got him right after you got out of the hospital. Will you mind telling us a little bit about your story and what led you to find This Is My Brave?
Absolutely. So I after coming out of the hospital a few times, I was really, really into poetry. It's backed off a little. I'm still way into it, but I was like really into poetry. And I was looking for ways to share it, get it out. I applied to be published in a journal I read. I was looking for open mics. I didn't find any good open mics, unfortunately, but um I found you guys.
Mhm.
Um listed on a website with a bunch of open mics, and it said mental health themed open mic. I said, "Oh, that sounds neat. That's right up my alley. I'll check it out." And I did. And I went, I auditioned at the library that they held auditions at, and they said, "Oh, perfect. We needed a teen for the show." I was the only teen that auditioned,
Mhm.
and I made it in.
That's amazing. Tell us a little bit about why it's important to you to be a part of something like This Is My Brave.
I think it's wildly important to normalize talking about mental illness and mental health. He wants me to pet him, that's why he's doing that. Um, but I think it's just so incredibly important that we don't stay silent, because if we stay silent, then nothing can really help us enough. But we need to talk about this stuff, and that's the underlying reason that it's just so important.
Yeah. What was it like for you to experience sharing your poetry on a stage in front of several hundred people in the theater that day? What did it feel like?
It was it was a mix of emotions. It was wonderful to say the least, but um it was like a weight off my shoulders because I had been carrying this just burden of so much bad stuff, what everyone says is bad stuff on me for so long, and I finally just got it out there,
Mhm.
and it was just such a relief, and it set me on this journey to keep getting involved through you guys, through Principal Pictures, to keep talking about it.
Yeah. That's how I describe it too, Joe, like a weight off my shoulders the very first time I told my story in our show back in 2014. And what would you say your friends thought about it? What, as word got out and you've been more public about your story with sharing with the video diaries, what's the reaction from your peers?
Um, Most of my friends, it's funny, we tend to stay, at least in my experience, people who are like me tend to stick with people who are like me.
Mhm.
Um, so a lot of us are, in that same boat of mental illness,
Mhm.
and they have all been wildly receptive to it. They have all thought it was a wonderful thing, been congratulatory on it, said, "Oh, great job, keep doing what you're doing." Um, I have a few friends who were not quite, I suppose, in the loop about mental illness,
Mhm.
and I suppose it brought them closer into the realm of the everyday life of some of my other friends, including me.
Mhm.
Um, and they don't talk about it as much. It takes a lot to break, that whole standard of we don't talk about this,
Mhm.
but it's getting there, and that's what's so incredible.
It's awesome. I'm looking to see if we have some comments here, and it looks like folks are chiming in. Amy Barnaby says, Joe rocks, your fellow cast member. So,
Yeah.
so it's awesome. Joe, thank you so much for being here. We're going to have you share more when we bring everybody all together. But have you go backstage. I'm going to bring in our next guest, Amber. So give me just a second. We'll be back with Joe in a little bit. Thanks, Joe.
Alrighty.
Let's get Amber Sessoms out here. Hi, Amber. Oh no, you're muted. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I knew I was going to have a little.
It's okay.
But Amber, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
How you doing?
I'm doing, so I noticed in one of your videos, you said, you'll go through a wave of emotions throughout the day. So I'm just constantly trying to check in with myself to see where I am, being mindful of that.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to get into more of that, but tell us a little bit about your background and then maybe go into how you got involved with This Is My Brave.
So I am a school psychologist, and I've been in the same district for I'll be going into my 12th year. So, we work with students with disabilities and those within the general population, trying to help them to make as much meaningful progress in school as they can, trying to eliminate barriers. So, I work with students with mental health issues that have learning disabilities, other cognitive disabilities, and I just try to support our teams as much as possible. So it's interesting because I'm kind of in your hometown, so I'm in the Hershey area. Yeah. And I think your production company came to shoot some videos of some of our students, and Dan Eichelbone, who was one of your classmates, said, "Oh, you should contact Amber Sessoms," because in 2017, we did a series of monologues for our staff as one of our in-service days. So it was really sharing stories and storytelling. So when they heard about what you were doing, what I've done, they were like, "Oh, you guys should really meet and connect." So it just really worked out wonderfully. I was the pilot for the high school episode. It was just a great opportunity to see students coming out and speaking their truth. I'm all about that. So in any way that I can help and support that, I will do that.
Yes, we loved having you. It was such a great structure to that show. It was a little different than we've normally done things, but we really wanted to bring in that expert voice at the end. And you were able to be with us and share, and take questions from the audience on how do we best support our teens going through this. And that's one thing I wanted to ask, like in general, well, twofold. Let's start kind of going back to how you're doing. I mean, what have you found are the best ways to cope with this pandemic just in general?
I know when you're first, because it was really abrupt for us. So that Friday, we're not coming back. We don't know how long it's going to last. So you're trying to gain as much information as you can. And I know we're so inundated with information, but I think at some point it's super unhealthy. So my husband's always the one he's like the news. And at some point he had to even step back and say, it's too much. So just really trying to balance out what you're consuming so that you're well and you're not just constantly being on. That's another thing. When you're in the cyber role, you're in virtual, you're constantly engaged, constantly on, constantly with your phone. At some point you have to have some kind of parameters put up so that you can take care of yourself. So just trying to be mindful. I try to stay within work hours, and on weekends I try not to check my email. People know how to reach me in case of an emergency, but I try to keep those parameters in place to make sure that I'm well, because I do have a husband and 3 girls. So I have a junior, a 5th grader, and then a 5-year-old. So it's a lot to juggle and balance. My husband's working in the office, which I stole from him briefly, on table with the 10-year-old and the 5-year-old, and our oldest child is upstairs doing work. So it's a balancing act, trying to give yourself grace that this is new for everyone, that it's not going to be perfect every day. There's no right or wrong to this. I think I tried to create some rules and barriers and boundaries, and some of that had to get thrown out the window because it's just new for all of us.
I am right there with you in everything you said. I mean, balancing the news, I think, is crucial. There is a point you need to take in a certain amount of that information that's being put out, but it can be completely overwhelming. So just picking one news source that you rely on and going there, getting what you need, and then disengaging there. But then also, I think what has been challenging for me is the whole working from home thing. With the lines being so blurred, you do have to set those boundaries. I think that's really crucial, is, unplugging and being able to take your weekends and your evenings, and because we all have jobs that keep us busy that we could work 24/7 if we wanted to, right? And it's having those avenues of, if you need me in an emergency, you know how to reach me, but really creating that balance for yourself. And it's important to adhere to those boundaries.
Yes.
And we're going to talk more about the student response and how, as adults, we can support our kids that are going through these issues of, I know me as a mom of a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, my kids definitely struggled when it first was announced that school's canceled, and all of a sudden you can't play with your friends. And, so that grieving process, their swim team that they're very engaged with was, cut off, we can't have practice. And so it was that grieving process. And so I want to get into that in a little bit with you on how can we manage that grief, and because it's so different for everyone, right?
Yes.
So I'm just taking a quick peek at time. Actually, let's go into that for a moment, Amber, if you could. I mean,
Okay.
What do you think? And then we'll have a larger discussion with everybody too. But like, what are some main tips on helping our kids through that grieving process?
I think one is listening, being a compassionate listener is so key. And I know you had some people in the beginning talking about that at your high school show, but I think oftentimes we want to do this oppression Olympics where it's like, oh, it's not that serious, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you still have health, you still have your family members are still alive, but these milestones are so hard for people to kind of get through. So I really kind of opened up communication, even with some of our students. We did a Zoom with our seniors and we had ideas of what we wanted to do. And I ran it by them. I said, the principal asked me to reach out to you. What do you think about this? And they had some criticism. I don't want to do that. I don't want something virtual. I had to give up so much. I want to have a real ceremony. I deserve to have my name read. It's just such a critical moment. So just allowing them to grieve and allowing them to talk through it. And even, my fifth grader is missing out on her ceremonies and moving on to middle school. So just allowing her to grieve that and giving her moments. So sometimes she'll be okay. And then she'll have a moment where she gets really tearful. And that is okay, because we're all in this together. We don't have any answers. So just understanding that you're not alone. What can we do to try to honor as much that we can and memorialize these events for you, but giving them the voice and the opportunity to speak up on what they would like to see happen, I think is so key.
I think it is. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, I guess, to say like we're all in this together, but that's really brought me a lot of comfort, knowing that everybody is in the same boat with this pandemic. I mean, it's and just knowing that taking it one day at a time is also really, really helpful to me, sometimes 1 hour at a time. And, and then, like you said, really listening and being there. Like, if they have a breakdown, trying to be patient and stop and say, tell me about how you're feeling. And just being that compassionate listener, I think makes a huge difference.
And letting them know that you don't have it all together. You don't have all the answers. I think as adults, they look to us. Oh, it's okay. Even teachers that are doing this online, saying, I'm new to this too. It's stressful for me too, but we're going to work through this together. I think is important because we don't have it all together.
Yeah, it's true. All right, Amber, thank you for your intro. I'm going to have you go backstage. I'm going to bring Audrey out as our third guest. And thank you so much for being a part of this with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to get you back when we do our group discussion. So hang tight back there. Hold on. Hi, Audrey.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So I want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with This Is My Brave.
Yeah. So my name's Audrey. I'm calling in from Boston. I was in the Boston 2018 show. My brother and I performed the song together. I just finished my master's in clinical mental health counseling and school counseling. Yay. Today was supposed to be my graduation ceremony, but since that was canceled, I get to celebrate with you guys instead. So just a quick shout out to any students out there who were supposed to graduate and don't get to. I'm right there with you.
Tell us a little bit more about, and I know it's probably very, very, very emotional. So Tears are okay, just know that. But tell us a little bit about what that feels like. Like you worked so hard during graduate school and you were looking forward to that moment. What's bringing you comfort in the fact that the celebration might not look exactly like what you thought it would?
Yeah, I think it was really hard at first, but I've been trying to find ways to find closure. And so, like, one of my best friends in the program and I today, we're still celebrating, socially distancing, of course. But um, yeah, I think it's definitely a really hard thing to have it canceled after working for 3 years.
Mhm.
But we still get our degrees, and the end result is still the same. The celebration is just going to look a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about you, and I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to be with us today and talk about your journey. And um, do you know what the next step looks like yet? Or I know we've talked a little bit about it, you and I, but can you share with everybody what you want to do with your degree?
So I can go two ways. I can be a school counselor, or I can be a mental health clinician. So, and as a clinician, I can be like a therapist or work in a treatment setting, have my own practice eventually. So, I think it would be cool to do both at some point. But initially, I'm just applying to both school and clinical positions. So,
Fantastic. And is there a particular age group you want to work with if you do end up the school route?
um, adolescents for sure. I
Mhm.
love middle schoolers, so ideally, it'd be really sweet to work in middle school.
That's
Um,
awesome. I
but
think
age.
I think that's the next level that we're going to get to, right? So, will you share with everyone your involvement in our college program?
Yeah. So last year we started a pilot college edition of This Is My Brave. So um, we had a cast of 10 college students who traveled to different colleges around the Boston area, and they shared their stories. Um, and it was amazing. And I've now taken over the producer role. So I am now accepting auditions and creating a cast to do the same thing for the following year, which will look different with everything going on now. But we still want to portray the same message to people and have people share their stories in some way.
And we're getting such great interest from the schools in Boston that Audrey's been coordinating with that want to bring these inspiring stories to their student body, and they also want their students to get involved. So we're going to have information on our website about that, but it is going to be Boston based again for the 2020-2021 school year. We'll look to expand further as we grow, but Audrey's been instrumental in helping us continue to grow the program. So we're so thankful to have you in that role as well. So, okay, what else, Audrey? Anything else you want to add about? Um, I don't know. What has it felt like to be part of the This Is My Brave community over the last couple years?
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. I never could have imagined participating in something like this. Just being like a shy person and someone who has trouble like public speaking. But it's been absolutely incredible to build connections with everyone in this program, get to hear so many amazing stories, and get to share my own story. So,
Will you give us a little bit of background on your story, a little bit about how you and Evan kind of came together, and we'll link your performance piece too.
yeah, so about my performance.
Mhm.
So our performance, we did a song together, and the song we performed was one that he had written for me when I was struggling with a mental illness, and that was a huge part of my recovery. And so we decided to sing the song together for This Is My Brave, and then I shared a little bit about my background, and he shared some about what it was like to be a supporter for someone who was really struggling.
And we constantly hear from audience members after performances like you and Evan's, where you hear from a caretaker's perspective, or a loved one who wants to find ways to support their loved one through these challenging times. And his message was so beautiful through the song he wrote for you. And so we'd love for everyone to check it out. We're going to have the performance piece is already linked, but we hear from audience members, we need more caretaker stories, because we all know someone who has gone through mental health issues. It's just a fact of life. I think it's going to be a part of everyone's life at some point. We all have brains. We all, it's a part of our total well-being. And so taking care of our mental health is obviously just as important as taking care of our physical health. And so as family members, when we can openly share and talk about it and support each other, I think that's one of the most beautiful things. So awesome. And you guys are super talented in music, your entire family. So it's awesome that you were able to share through music. Well, I am going to bring everybody back out. So I am going to, Audrey, for a moment, push you backstage and bring you back in. So hang tight. I'll be right back. Let's get Audrey back in. Amber and Joe. See if it works. All right. All right, guys, let me put our fancy overlay on and see if that works with our names. All right, how's everybody doing? Oh, let me get you guys unmuted. Gotcha. There's Joe. All right, so this is the fun part where we all get to chat together about this very, very strange time that we're in. I know for me, like when it first hit, it was very sudden. Like Amber said, it was all of a sudden on Thursday, the 12th, we wake up and schools were closed here in Virginia. And that adjustment was, I think that was one of the hardest parts in the beginning. But how did each of you, let's go around and kind of talk about how the world changed for you when COVID kind of first hit. So let's go maybe to Joe first.
Yeah, so I remember that we were in school, and there was a rumor that there was going to be no school for the rest of the year. And at this point, the governor was doing daily briefings, basically. And so we checked out the daily briefing at lunch, and it said nothing about that. It said schools will remain open for the foreseeable future. And then at the end of the day, like literally there are 8 periods in our school day. 8th period, the end of 8th period, we're leaving. I hear everyone like shouting, cheering, teachers being like, "Oh, be safe." And then I'm like, what's going on? I get to the car, check my phone, my group chat's blowing up. Someone sent the link, and the governor had announced, "Yep, we're just shutting them down for 2 weeks." And then 2 weeks came.
Yeah.
And it became longer than that. And then that time came, and it became longer than that. And at this point, it's the whole school year.
Mm-hmm. So for you, Joe, what do you're a junior, so you may not be grieving the loss of like a graduation, but what about the activities and the times with your friends? Like, how are you coping with the loss of those things in the immediate circumstances?
So initially, we were clinging to that belief that, oh, it's short, it's not going to be long. They're only canceling school for 2 weeks. We're going to be right back at it. And then that ended. But then they extended it for a little while. So we said, oh, just this little while longer. And we've just been kind of going on that, at least I have, that, oh, it's just going to be a little while longer. It's just going to be a little while longer. I mean, and if you keep repeating that, then you're never thinking at any point, oh, it's going to be so long until I see anyone. And you're never like breaking down over, it's going to be so long until I see anyone. It's always just a few more weeks, just a few more weeks. Because that's what I, at every stage of this, was believing. Because that's what I was being told. And I mean, honestly, it helped me get through it. It may not have been accurate, but it helped me get through it. So
I think it's a good technique. I mean, we do know this is temporary. This is, a time period that we all have to make adjustments and make sacrifices. But the hope is that we will get back to some sense of normalcy. What
yeah.
about for you, Audrey? How was it when it was first announced, and how did you cope?
Yeah, it was really, I mean, it was interesting because it wasn't anything that was supposed to be super long, or I mean, we knew it would be a while, but we didn't know that schools would close for the rest of the year. So at the time, I was going to my internship 3 days a week, in school, working at a hospital nanny. Like, I have a bunch of different things that I was doing, and so I went to my internship one day, and then the next day I wasn't, like, I couldn't go back, and so that's been really weird to not be able to say goodbye to the kids that I've been working with all year. And then same with school too. We had a class, and then the next week we didn't have class anymore, so we couldn't say bye to anyone else in person. So I think I've just been trying to find ways to continue to stay connected with people. And Zoom and FaceTime has been awesome because we can also talk. Yeah.
Yeah, technology is something I know so many of us are super grateful for. Amber, something we talked about yesterday when we were kind of prepping together was the fact that it is really tough for the counselors to be staying in touch with their students who need services or need access. What can you share about what that looks like now due to COVID and how families can still access support?
It really does depend. I'm in Pennsylvania, so what I found is it really does depend on the district and some of the parameters that some districts or solicitors put in place. And there is some recommendations from the state level, our Department of Education, and then we look to our national organizations, our state organizations for support. But even, for example, for me, I just got an email. I said, right, I don't check my email on the weekends, but it's on my phone. And I saw pop up, and it was from a parent saying that her student is not doing well. Before this COVID pandemic, her grandfather died. So her mom reached out and said, would you be willing to do a virtual check-in, not necessarily therapy, but a check-in with my daughter? She's not doing well. So of course, I'm more than willing to do that. So we have parents that will reach out and say, my student's not doing well. I'm not doing well. I had another person, a local person actually from the show that we stayed in contact, and she said, there's a person in your district that doesn't have resources for the utilities. They need food, they need all these things. What can you do to help? So connecting them with our school social workers. Thankfully, we have 4 of them. We need a whole lot more, but we're thankful for the 4. We were able to create a community resource page. Now the issue is it's online. So if you don't have access to the internet, if you don't have any of the technology, you're not necessarily going to know where to locate that. So our thought was, when you're coming, because we do meals throughout the week, lunches. So can the students, when they're coming and picking up their food, can we give them a pamphlet of information so that they know how to reach out for help and what other things in the community are available so that they can get support. But it's really a matter of like this resource mapping and seeing what is still available, what does it look like? Because virtually people are doing teletherapy. What does that look like? Some families are completely opposed to it. It's scary. It's uncharted territory. Do I really want you in my house? Even for me, I'm like making sure the background looks okay. So I can't imagine what that's like for families that maybe have this shame about what their household looks like. How am I connecting? Or if I don't have access, how do we still manage to do that for families?
Well, along those lines, we're able to share our resources through our website. What would you say are some resources or some things that parents can look for in their teens that might be a teen that might be missing some kind of milestone celebration, like a graduation, or the loss of maybe a sport that they loved, that they miss their team and their coaches? What's something that parents can look out for, and how they can support their kid during this difficult time?
I think the biggest thing, what's happened that we're in this isolation, is that it's exacerbated a lot of maybe symptoms that we already had. So if you already struggle with depression and anxiety, it could just blow that, through the roof. And then for those that are more neurotypical that haven't been dealing with things, maybe they're more sad, maybe they're having trouble getting out of bed. I was talking with a colleague, and she's like, this student was, on track, was taking college level courses. Now he doesn't want to get out of bed. And it's really a matter of, are they just grieving this loss because they're supposed to be graduating, or is it something more where they need some level of intervention? So if you're noticing, if your child is struggling for 2 or more weeks, like every day is struggling, and really the biggest thing is that they're not like themselves. They completely drastically changed. Their personalities changed. That is a big red flag. You need to reach out to even the resources you have on your website. You can reach out to your school counselor, social workers, and school psychologists. We're more than willing to help and support, but it's just that big drastic change that you notice they're not themselves. And being that we're so close now that we're connected, you should really be able to pick up on that, and don't take that for granted.
Also along the lines of noticing a change in their kind of demeanor, but also right sleeping patterns and eating patterns, just being mindful of that, right?
Yes. And I know for me, I struggle with depression, and I can isolate myself very easily. And even though I'm in a household of 5, I can still isolate myself. I can still be off to myself. So if you have people in your life, so even if you live alone, that you're constantly making sure you're engaging, you're checking in, because my husband can check me real quick and say, you're kind of being distant, what's going on? So making sure you have someone in your life that really knows you and that can kind of check you when something's a little off is really helpful. The connections are just so key. So like you were saying, Audrey, Zoom, whatever you have to do, the FaceTime, so that you're constantly engaging. As a human being, we're naturally wanting to do that. I have a friend that lives alone. Her family's outside of the area, and she was telling me Brene Brown's changed her life. So the new there's an episode with Vivek Murthy, the former. It was so good at talking about loneliness and how we need these connections as human beings. So more than ever, we're seeing that in this isolation, that we need connections, meaningful connections where we can be our authentic selves. Is so important. We can be vulnerable. And that's so important in the work that you're doing, Jen, is that you're getting to the vulnerability, to being authentically who you are and owning that. It's just so needed in our communities.
Yeah, and I think it's important to take the time to reach out, because and know that if you reach out and you miss them, like you have to leave a message, or it's being creative, like texting them then and saying, when can we connect, and setting a time and sticking to it, because it can be, challenging to, in these times of having to reach folks technically, through technology, finding the right moment, right? Because we're, oh, well, you'll think, oh, they're going to be, busy feeding their kids lunch, or right now I'm not going to call. Or, I find that happens to me sometimes. Like I'll think, oh, I'm going to check in with my friends. Oh no, they're going to be cooking dinner for the family. But don't hesitate to do that, because when you're thinking of them, I read something online that said, if you have a thought from a friend crosses your mind, send them a photo or something from a time that you enjoyed in the past together, and looking forward to when we can be back together again means a lot. And just being creative with how we're connecting. It's so different to do this all technically versus being able to be right there in person. But we're getting creative with, like, one of my friends does a trivia night on Fridays, which has been fun, or virtual happy hours, or just even saying, let's all just meet up on Zoom and catch up, and then have those conversations. How are you doing? Really,
I want to add to that too, Jen, because I honestly feel more connected to some people in some ways right now, because I think everyone is reaching out to everyone to try to build that connection. So it's been, I don't know, this isn't a great time, but that's one of the positives that I've found. Like my family, every Thursday we do Thankful Thursday. So it's my family and my cousins and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents. And so that's really cool, because we don't usually get to see each other every week. And then my mom started like a book club with all the girls in our family, and we've just been doing a lot of like FaceTimes. And I think it's just really cool that have been able to connect with so many people that I haven't been able to since everyone has been so busy.
I love that. That's a really good point. What about you, Joe? What are younger folks, what are the teens doing to stay connected during this time?
Well, there's a lot of like just texting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I personally haven't been doing a lot of like video calls just because that requires you to figure out a time when you're both
Mm-hmm.
available, and texting, you can just, oh, I'm thinking of them, shoot them a text.
Yeah.
Oh, they're thinking of me, they shoot me a text.
Mm-hmm.
And it just works like that. And if you happen to catch each other at the same time, you have a conversation. And that's been working well for keeping me in touch with my friends. But I'm sure everyone else is doing it a little differently, or some people are doing it the same. It probably just varies by everyone.
It's a good point about texting. It is true, like you, again, not knowing, should I try them on FaceTime or should I just shoot a text? I think that goes through my mind a lot. But another app we had mentioned on our one of episodes of Brave TV was Marco Polo, which is a fun app where you can leave video messages. So it's a little more intimate than a text message where you get to see their smile and see them. But so you might want to check that one out. But we did have a question from one of our viewers. Julia asks, what are the signs in proud teens who are good at hiding the typical signs? It's a good question for Amber.
That's a good question. And I think with the issue of teens, and I'm just going to generalize, Joe, don't take offense, even with adults too, is that we have a hard time articulating our feelings. We don't really have words for it. So that is a hard part, like that you can find someone that you can be vulnerable with to share that. So often, like as far as signs, again, it's still like if you can have that irritability. So if it's depression, they can still be super irritable, and people are like, well, isn't that how teenagers are anyway? But again, if you're noticing a drastic change and a pervasive change in their behavior across settings, that's really key. But what I say to kind of get through the being proud is for me, what I do, and I know like clinicians are different. We all are trained in, being disclosing. So I share my story. I talk about the struggles that I had with my mom abandoning me when I was little, and how that made me view myself as I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy enough for my mother to stay. And sharing that pain and being authentic about how I struggled in college and almost failed out, I can start unlocking that for students that think that, oh, she has it all together, she's Dr. Sessoms. And that really starts to open them up and say, you know what, maybe that I can share some of myself too, because I don't have that shame or that stigma anymore. You can't, my story, you can't put me in a box and say, oh, she's broken, she's damaged. I came out of it. So modeling that resilience, modeling that vulnerability, and just being real and honest, I think can help with some of that pride, which is really this sense of insecurity and shame that students are carrying, so that you can start unlocking that and chipping away at that a little bit.
That's a really good point. I think the more we share, and that's something that Brene Brown talks about, when you're at that point where you're ready to share your story, you've done the work, and you are able to open up, this shame starts to melt away because it can't survive that being spoken aloud. Yeah. And so I want to throw it over to Joe and say, do you feel that way as a teen, like having opened up? Does it sounds like it, the shame has started to lift, and you're able to talk more and more about what you've gone through. It makes you even more, builds that resiliency, right?
Yeah. So I'm not ashamed of my mental illness. It's just something that exists, but I definitely used to be very ashamed of it. That's just learning to, in myself, say, all right, this is just a fact of life for the time being. It's not something I had control over at the time, because with what I was given, I just couldn't have changed it I can't change it in retrospect. So there's no point being ashamed of it in retrospect. So I just kind of stopped feeling ashamed of it. And that just kind of sounds crazy, but I mean, I just stopped being ashamed. It took longer than that. It wasn't like a snap instant, ooh, yeah, I feel fine with my mental illness.
And your writing, I'm guessing your writing helped you kind of really make sense of what you went through a little bit, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the big parts of it was meeting people who are like me.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I could see that, oh, it isn't just me who's
Mm-hmm.
like this. There are thousands of people like this, millions probably like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just me. It's not crazy uncommon that I would be like this. There's no reason for me to be ashamed of it.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're being so open. I think that more teens, as they hear the stories from the Teen Video Diary Project, will see the fact that it's so normal for us all to go through these experiences, and they'll feel more inclined to reach out for help if they're struggling. I know a teen who went through a struggle recently, fairly recently, and the one thing that she felt she learned over the 5 months of dealing with this struggle she had, a mental illness, she said, I wish I would have known back then when I first started getting sick. I wish I would have known it was okay to reach out for help. Like, you don't have to be like, I felt like I wasn't sick enough is kind of what her mindset was. But really, you could be at any place, of concern with your mental health, that reaching out will make a difference, so there's no sick enough, time. It's like, if you're not feeling stable with your mental health, reaching out and, reaching for a resource or a support person to help you get to that resource is what you need. So
That's such a good point, Jen, because I think we have this myth of what it should look like. You know, the poster child for depression, and they're just down and out crying all the time. It's not always like that. There's, we have these parameters. There's this whole range of feeling of depression, anxiety, and all these other things. But it's okay if you're not feeling like yourself again, then seek the help when you need it. And it's not like you're being extra. People, they just want attention. They're not really that bad. I have someone over here that's been hospitalized 3 times. It's not about that. It's your perception. It's how you're perceiving your reality, how you're interpreting things that are going on around you. And if it's disrupting various areas of your life, it's time to get help. Because like you're saying, you don't want to wait until it's too late. I have a same thing. I wish I had listened to you back in October, but now, where she is now and how unhealthy she is now, because she wasn't ready at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You do need to be ready to get the help, but I do think the sooner you're able, like you're saying, to realize, like, this isn't my normal, self, and, what's changed? What have I gone through recently? Whether it is something like this pandemic that's affecting all of us in many different ways, my mental health isn't the same. How can I stabilize and get that help? So, are there any resources you guys would point to specifically as a place where you go that really has been inspiring to you in terms of looking for tips for coping right now?
I have looked at, there's one of our people through our insurance company, like through our HR department, she put out an awesome newsletter, and it had links to various things for dealing with COVID. And the one thing that was on there was, I'm looking at it now, so the Prevent Child Abuse America's coronavirus website. So there's a list of resources, things that you can do to stay connected. And within there embedded, there's other various links to other resources through the CDC and how that you can deal. One of the things that I'll say is that even people that are Asian American, how they're getting this bias and this racism that's being thwarted on them because of this pandemic. So that we're dispelling these myths, that we're working through this racism and protecting those that are most vulnerable right now is so key, because we have to start thinking about re-entry and what is that going to look like. So I really like that that resource, because it helps you stay connected, sees the awkward. It's really great. It's more targeted towards teens, but they have ways that you can still stay connected and things that you can do daily for family, community. There's those virtual dance parties and all those things. So I think those are just some really great ideas. People have been getting creative about how do you stay engaged.
Awesome. Audrey or Joe, do you have anything to add in terms of resources? We'll link that those sites you mentioned, Amber, in the notes.
My therapist is a great resource. Shout out to him if he's watching.
Actually, Joe, thank you for bringing up that your therapist, because we have this offer with BetterHelp. I use BetterHelp.com for my therapy, and I've been using them for about 9 months now. And I really like my therapist, and it's consistent. I see her every Friday virtually, and I was always nervous to try virtual, but 9 months
It's
ago,
the only option now.
now it's the only option. And back then, I just took the leap and started with a new person. They match you up based on a questionnaire you fill out, but we have an offer for a month of free therapy with BetterHelp. Just go to betterhelp.com/thisismybrave. Yeah. And it's a great, getting started in therapy is always, you have to start somewhere, but now more than ever, I think we could all use someone who maybe isn't in our immediate family to talk to about this. Right. And so I really hope everyone will give it a shot, and it's affordable, and it's you can get through your insurance, you can figure out ways to cover. So reach out. That's a resource that we like to promote. Audrey, anything that has been helping you, like your primary?
I don't have a specific like resource to link you guys to, but I think a lot of the online like fitness communities have been super helpful, and I know a lot of different fitness programs are giving like free like a few months, and so that's been really helpful because I've been doing like online yoga every day. So things like that, so that I can still like move my body, add more structure to my day. That's really helpful.
That's an awesome tip. I agree. There are definitely days where I don't feel like doing any kind of exercise, but if you have that resource where you can log on and just press play and do a quick 20 minutes and move your body, I feel like it makes a big difference in your day. So it's a good one. Trying to see in the comments if we had any other questions.
Earlier they were asking about my intent bracelet.
Yeah, tell us about that. I have one of those too.
Yeah, it says elevate. So in my mind, like elevating those are within the margins, making sure that they are at the center instead of being out in the margins. So that's what it was. So whoever asked that, it's elevate.
Awesome. And isn't that website myintent.com?
Is it .com or .org? But yes, my intent. Yeah.
And you can pick your word on the ring, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they have maker kits. So I'm hoping when we get back to some sense of normal or get back to school, I wanted to do something with our staff and have my intent bracelets made. So that might even be more important now than ever. But they have maker kits that you can make. But yeah, so elevate.
That's awesome. All right. Well, now's the time in the broadcast that I'd like to go around, and we're going to do one more round of a question. And that is just if you could leave the viewers with one thing that that you'd want them to know about kind of making it through this period as a student, as a mental health professional for students, a school psychologist. What is one piece of advice you might be able to share to help folks through this time? Who wants to go first? Joe.
I think even anytime, but especially right now, just talk about it. Talk about everything that's going on. Not to the point where it's overwhelming, but to the point where you're getting it out there. And my bird's squawking. Sorry about that. But you need to have conversations. You can't progress forwards if you don't know what's going on. You can only stay the same or progress backwards.
Really good advice, Joe. Talk about it. Keep the conversation going. I like that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to say that I know we kind of mentioned it earlier, but that it's okay to be sad and to grieve everything that's going on. And you're not the only one that's feeling that way, because we're all in this situation. I know everyone's situation is different, but collectively, we all have this experience where we have to quarantine and we're losing a lot of different things. But in that too, I just want to challenge you to find the positive things that are coming out of this. Like I know I mentioned feeling more connected to other people. Also feeling like I've had a second to just step back and breathe in the middle of my last semester and having a million things going on. Yeah, I guess I want people to be able to make space for both of those.
I love that.
Just Joe and Audrey, I mean, those are awesome points. And I think, Joe, you hit on something earlier, and it's probably escaping me now, but just that sense of isolation, and that's already happening now. But and with mental health, you know, that our minds will play those tricks on us, like we're the only one going through it. So again, like Audrey and Joe and everyone's saying, like making sure that you're connecting with others, looking for those opportunities, and looking at this as seeing that silver lining, that there is some good that will come out of all this bad that's happening. Connecting with those that you haven't talked to in such a long time, I think has been awesome. But again, like my biggest thing is like being your authentic self. And I think that's your platform definitely does that. Just getting to know yourself, taking this time to know what really makes you tick, who you really are, and being okay and loving yourself for who you are, flaws and all. I think that's so key.
I love that advice. I mean, we're not going to have perfect days. We're going to have these ups and downs. This is a roller coaster that we're all on right now. But just finding joy in the simple things and having those important conversations and staying connected is so important. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this with us, for sharing your experiences, your stories, and your wisdom with our audience. We really appreciate you guys. And Audrey, congratulations on your graduation. You're going to make an amazing counselor, and we're so proud of you. So thank you again, everybody. Stay tuned. We're going to announce our next week's episode later this week, and we're so grateful you were here with us today. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye, guys.